Welcome to the Fiscal Physical Podcast. Join us each week as we sit down with the founder of Alchemy Wealth Management and author of Your Fiscal Physical, Ryan Nelson. Tune in to gain valuable insights and practical tips as we simplify complex financial concepts into digestible lessons. From budgeting to retirement planning, this podcast is your go-to resource for mastering financial literacy.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of the Fiscal Physical Podcast. My name is Aaron. I am here with Ryan Nelson, my good pal, my financial advisor as well, and founder of Alchemy Wealth Management here. And Ryan, what's the good word, my man?
Yeah, not too much. Doing well on my end. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good. I did recently see, actually at the point of recording this, you've probably won several more awards, but I did want to shout out, you keep stacking those awards for Alchemy Wealth Management and such too. So I just wanted to give you a moment in the spotlight there to maybe thank everybody who was in there. I'm just super impressed by what you've been able to accomplish, man. It's a really good job.
Oh, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yep, for sure. So with those pleasantries out of the way, let's talk about something, everybody. This is the reason why you guys came here. Let's talk about the national debt. I know it's a thrilling topic. I can't remember if it's in New York or somewhere, but there's like a big clock. It's not a clock, but it's like a reader board or something like that like people, once again, watching the news, maybe I should stop doing that, but it talks about the national debt. That's a topic I swear comes up daily, if not weekly, about where we sit with the national debt. You're throwing around words like trillions in there, and anytime you get to that number, my brain just kind of shuts off because I just don't really know what that means.
Right.
But I think it's in New York, I want to say, or somebody just set it up somewhere where they were tracking how much per minute the national debt was going up, and it was I watched this episode on it. It's kind of cool, but I guess I don't really know if it was cool or not. So anyway, today we're going to be talking about what the national debt actually is. Is it a deficit? Is it a debt? Is it bad? Is it good? Kind of get your financial opinion on this here.
So the national debt is how much the government has borrowed over time. So typically, if you think about how the government borrows, it's typically selling bonds, so government bonds. Mm-hmm. So if it says, hey, we want to raise another $1 trillion, it can issue $1 trillion worth of bonds. Then people like you and me and other governments even go buy up these bonds because we want the returns. And when we buy the bond, we're giving the money to the U.S. government. That raises the money for them. That raises money for them, but it puts them into another $1 trillion of debt effectively. And then they can use that money to go spend however they want, and they have to pay us interest on it, right? So that's effectively what the debt is. It is not the deficit. So you hear a lot of times people will talk about the debt and the deficit similarly. Sure. Or I feel like a lot of times you'll almost hear them used interchangeably.
I was just going to say, I almost would feel like in my mind, I'm like, oh, they're pretty interchangeable when it comes to that.
And that's not necessarily true. So the debt is how much total the government owns, in all of history, right? That's just how much the government owns at this point in time. The deficit is how much more we're spending than we're bringing in at this point in time.
Oh, okay.
So the deficit, we're typically looking at over an annual number. So we'd say, what would be the 2026 deficit? How much more are we spending in 2026 than we're bringing in 2026? And that deficit will then add to our total debt, right? So if we were to use an analogy and put this more in terms of personal finance that most of us could more relate to, if we went and bought a house and we owe $500,000 on the house, that'd be the equivalent of the national debt. That'd be our individual debt. We owe $500,000 on the house. That'd be the equivalent of the national debt. They owe $500,000 or trillions to the U.S. Public and other individuals and other government entities, right? So that's how much total they owe in debt. And then your deficit, again, would be how are you doing that year? It's your cash flow that year. So if this year I earned $100,000 of income, but I spent $120,000, well, I'd be in a $20,000 deficit. And if let's say I did that on credit cards, I would owe a credit card company an extra $20,000 this year. So then my debt would have raised total from $500,000 for just the house to $520,000 with the house and the credit card, right? So my total debt would have grown from $500,000 to $520,000. My deficit that year would have been $20,000. So the same is true for national debt. The debt is just the total amount you owe, and the deficit is how much sort of more you're going into debt that individual year.
No, that makes sense too. And I think about it, you equated it to like a household specifically.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I mean, one of the things that my wife and I have talked about, and we've talked about as well too, being my financial advisors, there's good debt you can have. There's debt you want to avoid. But I guess the main thing is if you can get by without having any debt, like I think that's generally, don't want to speak all the time, that's pretty good. With that, you can relatively be in a good spot depending on your situation. But if I was to kind of run, I guess, my life like the U.S. government, I suppose, like we're kind of just racking up this debt.
Right.
And that's like, I feel like counterintuitive to like, I guess the advice that I've always like lived by, I suppose. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, there are people who live that way, for sure.
Yeah.
It'd be hard to plan for retirement if each year your net worth is continuing to go more negative.
Sure.
So that's an interesting, like, kind of thought. Yeah, like there are differences between the U.S. government and the household. It makes, we're more familiar with our own household finances. That's why I just did it. And lots of other people use the household relationship as an analogy, because then we can start to get a better feel for, that's how now it makes sense to me what the debt is. And okay, now it makes sense to me what the deficit is. So it's a nice analogy to help connect those dots. But then as you start diving in deeper, the honest truth is they are different, right? The U.S. government is different than a household entity. The U.S. government's not planning for retirement, right? Yeah. It doesn't have the lifespan of a single person, right? Like you and I, we have like goals we want to achieve, maybe pay for a kid's college, maybe save up for retirement, go on a vacation, and then eventually we'll pass away. Like the US government is just inherently different, right? Like it's not a single individual that's leaving debt to like heirs. It's not something that's saving for a retirement, right? So like inherently it having a negative debt is not as detrimental to it as like us. We would not be able to continue to go into debt, have a deficit, keep growing a debt, increase our net worth or decrease our net worth, have a bigger negative net worth year after year after year, right, and then somehow successfully retire, right?
Sure.
So there is an innate difference between like the U.S. government, how it operates, how it works, what its goals are, and how us as individuals operate, what our goals are, et cetera.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Different rules for different entities, I suppose.
Yep.
So it's always one of those things with those analogies. I love them. I think it's great. One, I love using the round numbers. It makes it 500,000 is a lot easier to like comprehend than like 2 trillion, because at that point, like, what's $1,000,
right?
That kind of it. But it is important to kind of realize that, like, hey, like maybe your household, but government's kind of a different beast when it comes to those kind of areas there. So I guess that leads me into my next question as far as like, the national debt tracker or whatever you want to say with it. Is it worth, I guess, paying attention to or seeing like when these things come up, the word trillions of dollars in debt, like is that, I guess, worth exploring, I suppose, or being aware of even?
Yeah, certainly it's good to be aware of it, for sure. I think there's certain myths out there about like our country is going to go bankrupt, and that's just probably not true or very likely to happen. I guess anything's possible, but it's not very likely to happen. So yes, it's good to be aware of. You don't want to probably fall prey to some of these like egregious like myths, right? That being said, there are some real concerns and potential trade-offs here. So rising interests, interest rising over time is a concern. And as your inflation, we've talked about inflation in the past, as inflation creeps up, it crowds out other spending. So if you start spending more money on gas and groceries, that's less money you can spend traveling. So if you value traveling, well, if the more gas and groceries starts costing you, the less you can travel, right? So it's something you certainly want to be aware of. And the more debt the government goes into, the more likely we are to experience inflationary pressures. It's not a guarantee, but the more likely. So something, to just be aware of and cognizant of. In episode 120, we talked a little bit about the tax system and how it actually works. And so the reality is when we think about our national debt, and we talked either a week or two ago about the gold standard. We mentioned we moved off the gold standard. Now we're backed, the U.S. dollar is backed by the faith of the U.S. government. The U.S. government raises its funds through the U.S. tax system, right?
It's a fun circle.
Right. And so when you start thinking about this, it's like, are we are we really going to go bankrupt or anything? It's like, well, if we understand how the tax system works and the fact that the U.S. government is basically backed by you and I and all of our friends and family and coworkers, right? It's like we can start to see that it's pretty unlikely that will happen. That being said, there are some real risks, and inflation being one major risk. And so, yeah, I'd say it's good to be aware of, good to keep our eyes on, good to be cognizant of. Maybe as we're like electing government officials and stuff, like you wouldn't certainly want to turn a blind eye to this.
No, that's a good point. And I think that being aware of those things and using your voting rights, whoever you might vote for, to vote for someone who aligns with what your values, your goals are, and the influence that you want to have when it comes to that. I think that's a really good way to put it. It's like, hey, I could watch the news and get scared all I want, but like, what impact can you make? And I think it's also like, harkens back, we've said it many a time, is like meeting with your financial advisor. If you're worried about something, like talk to that individual. Is it a financial worry? Right. Is it a safety worry or something like that? Probably your financial advisor is better with the financial worry than the safety piece of it. But at least you can plan for these different things that might come up and feel comfortable of like, okay, this is what's happening maybe with the vast majority of it. Where am I at in my situation? And focus on that a little bit more, I suppose, can be a little bit better there.
No, it makes complete sense. So yeah, in summary, I think that, the national debt, it's real, it's very large. At the time of this recording, it's almost $40 trillion.
40 trillion?
Almost, yeah. And by the time of this recording, it's probably over 40 trillion. Who knows? Yeah. So, yeah.
Such a big number. That's
exactly.
Incredible.
Yeah, hard to wrap our brains around, right? And so, yeah, it's real. It's very large, but it's also, I think, oftentimes misunderstood. It's not the same as an individual being in $40 trillion of debt, right? So something to pay attention to. Certainly, I think it is important, but also, to your point earlier, not worth necessarily, getting worked up over some of the things that you can't control around it. But there are some actions that you might be able to take, and it's important to be aware of and know the pros and cons.
Yep. No, I think one of the lines you've used is just enough to be dangerous.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So you're at a party or something like that. You talking about the national debt? You can be like, are you talking about the national debt or deficit?
Yeah, exactly.
And see how many people's eyes go.
And then you can just walk out.
Exactly.
Walk away
and I don't have anything else to contribute. I just wanted to ask the question.
Yeah.
I just dropped the grenade and left, kind of piece of it there. So awesome, Ryan. Well, appreciate it as always, my man. Appreciate you breaking that down. Hopefully, you guys learned a little bit something about the U.S. national debt and got a little bit of an explanation there. And we'll be right back on the other side of this with some personal stuff.
And now, to put the personal in personal finance.
Welcome back, everybody, to this side of the Fiscal Physical podcast. My name is still Aaron, and I'm still here with Ryan Nelson. And today, Ryan, I got a little bit of I don't know if I want to consider it a morbid question, but it's one that's gonna maybe give the listeners pause. You ready to dive in?
Let's do it.
All right. So my question is, would you rather lose your sight, your hearing, or your sense of taste? I'm curious to see what your breakdown is on this one here.
Yeah, for me, it's like incredibly easy. My sense of taste, it's not even close. Yeah, I mean, we're sight dominant. Like, to lose your sight would be so painful. And then to not be able to hear anything or anybody would be so challenging as well. And I'm not a huge foodie. I mean, I love food as much as the next person, but I love like all food equally. So yeah, I don't have like exquisite taste buds or can't tell the difference between like a fine wine and a cheap wine or anything.
Sure.
So, that maybe that sense isn't as developed for me. So off
Not
with
yet.
that sense. Yeah, true. But yeah, so for me, it's a no-brainer. I would go with taste, I think. I'm not a real foodie. I don't really like going, or like I do like going to nice restaurants.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But almost what I like more about going to a nice restaurant is the event and the experience and like seeing the ambiance and enjoying it with friends and family and having a conversation and like
hearing the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And the event, I like the events more than the food itself.
Right.
And so, yeah, for me, no brainer, taste. For you, I'm curious. I got two questions.
Okay.
Same question back to you.
Okay.
But also, secondarily, I'm intrigued. There's more than just those three senses.
There are.
How come like smell and touch aren't on here?
Yeah, I was going to say, that was actually, it's funny you mentioned that. Was going to be my follow-up to you about like, what if I threw in smell or touch with those two? But honestly, I still think that you're right. Taste, I would.
Yeah.
I love eating. I think it's great, but I also feel like I'd always like have the memory of like what I ate too. But I do wonder if you lose your sense of taste, you also lose your sense of smell. Like, because,
I know
like,
they're related.
I know they're related, like they're the olfactory system or something like that, which I think I'm saying that right, but hard to say with that. So I wonder if you'd like lose that package deal. But the one for me is I don't want to lose my sight like that. I can't, that would be horrific there. Hearing, you wouldn't be able to listen to this podcast, so that wouldn't be great either. So, but I think with sense of taste, I'm like, yeah, I know what things taste like. I know that like I could still get the nutrition I need to live pretty well with that. So I think I'd also go with taste. So maybe a little bit of a boring answer when it came to that.
I just did I feel like it's a no-brainer. If any of our listeners don't think it's taste, then unsubscribe.
Exactly. No, don't do that.
I just did a quick Google and I feel like this like sums it up perfectly. I just Googled. This is just the first like Gemini AI thing that comes up and answers it. So who knows how accurate this is? But I just Googled percentage of brain dedicated to each sense. So for sight, it says sight or vision uses 30 to 50% of the visual cortex. So let's just call it 30 to 50%. Touch dedicates about 11% of the cortex. Hearing about 3 to 8% of the cortex, and then taste and smell combined about 0.01%.
Really? Okay, wow. So it is a pretty low percentage of that.
If that's even, I mean, that could be off by an order of magnitude, but so if sight is, somewhere around 40%, touch, call it 10%, hearing, call it 5%, taste and smell combined for 0.01%, according to Google's Gemini.
Yeah.
It's like, sight, we're just so sight dominant, like losing your sight would be crazy, and then touch, and then hearing, and then taste and smell.
Yeah.
Be gone with them.
Absolutely. Be gone with them. Who needs them anyway?
Exactly.
Yeah, like it's not like I think it's funny you mentioned like a fine wine or something like that, and as I get older, I keep waiting for this palate to develop. I'm just like, and it was a while ago, like on like a New Year, I think it was New Year's or something. Like we did like a wine tasting of like $80 bottle of wine versus like an $8 bottle of wine, and like you can taste the difference, but after I have a glass of wine, most wine just kind of starts to taste the same to me too. I think it's more about like the after effects of like what it does. Like I'm like, oh man, I got a headache pretty quick after drinking that $8 bottle. But I do think I love those kind of things where you're like, oh, like this is a $70 cut of meat. This is like a $20 cut of meat, and like, what can you taste the difference in like a hamburger like that or something like that? I think those are all super fun to kind of find out.
There's probably no chance I could tell the difference.
I don't think I could either. To be honest, I'd be like, well, they both have cheese on them.
My brain, my brain's getting the 0.01% dedicated to it. Somebody else's brain might have like more dedicated to it to taste to taste and smell. But
I could do without 0.1 that piece of it. I'm good. So awesome. Well, thanks, Ryan. Appreciate the conversation as always. Let us know, listeners, what you'd lose in that case and your argument behind it there. And I'm sure you guys are checking us out wherever you get your podcasts at, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, whatever it might be. Check us out. We'd love to have you guys follow us along on this journey. And with that in mind, Ryan, any final thoughts?
As always, stay the course.
Thank you for joining us for the Fiscal Physical Podcast. Until next time, happy listening. And as always, stay the course. If you have a question or topic suggestions, please email us at podcast@alchemywealth.com. If you enjoyed today's discussion, subscribe to the podcast to ensure you never miss an episode. And consider leaving us a rating and review on your favorite platform. This helps other listeners like you find the show. For more resources, you can visit Alchemy Wealth Management's website at www.alchemywealth.com or find your Fiscal Physical, the book, on Amazon. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention that personal finance is just that, personal. Please don't take anything we say as advice. The preceding content is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It's not an offer or a solicitation, nor should it be construed or relied upon for tax, legal, or investment advice. It doesn't consider your personal financial situation or objectives and may not be suitable for you.